Good day, YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about my other job, which is for the Air Force as a civilian. I'm currently away from my civilian job because I'm on active duty for 3 years for the Air Force Reserve as an AGR. I started my job in 2006 as a civilian for the Air Force immediately when I left active duty. Number one thing is to network. I'll talk about that in just a moment. My career field code is 0101, which is social science, human resources. That's what it is. I worked at the Airmen and Family Readiness Center for 10 years. And like I said, I'm away from that job and I have return rights. I'll talk about that as well. When I say networking, it's when I applied for that job, it was before the bubble burst in 2006. So the housing bubble burst in 2008. So luckily, I went into that job before all of that, where jobs got tough to get. Networking is key because I qualified for that job just like other people as well. However, I had an inside edge. And in that I knew the director and I knew the chief from civilian personnel, two wonderful ladies who helped me out, and I was able to get that job. I also had veterans preference, 5 points. There is another one for veterans preference if you're disabled, and that is 10 points. So I qualified for the 5 points. That's what I'm going to talk about today. GS stands for, I just went blank. I'll come back to that. It'll come back to me. I'm a GS 11. I started off as a GS 11, and I never progressed because where I worked, there was one GS 12, which is your pay grade, and that was for the director. But I was progressing on the reserve side, so I was perfectly fine with that. And at the same time, I loved talking about finances. I was a financial counselor with service members. That's who was my audience, my customers. All branches have the equivalent of civil service. I worked for the Department of the Air Force as a civilian, and it is a very professional environment. That's one thing that I like. If you like the camaraderie of working in the military, whatever branch, as a civil servant, you're also going to have that professionalism, that camaraderie. So that's a good thing. That's how come it appealed to me. When I say I was a GS 11, when I first got that job, people would ask me, how did you get a GS 11 job? Who do you know? What did you do? Because apparently a GS 11 is a good pay grade. However, I didn't know exactly how much it was. And I'm going to tell you this, it's really not all that. It was equivalent to an E5 active duty service member. So in the Air Force, that's a staff sergeant. An E5 was making more than I was as a GS 11. That's reality. So I went from active duty to civil service, which I was thankful for, but I did take a pay cut. And that may be because service members on active duty get tax breaks. Their housing and their food is 100% tax-free. So I did that, and I did that for 10 years, and I was also a reservist on the side. And I loved that because I had 2 jobs. Now, one of the good benefits that you have as a civilian, civil service, is if you are in the reserves or guard, every October 1st, you will get 120 hours of military time. So when you go do your annual tour on the reserve side or guard side, your civilian job will pay you up to 120 hours as well. You will have to submit a copy of your orders, piece of cake, double dip. That is a benefit. That's military leave. USERA is the program that I'm using right now to be away from my civilian job because I'm on active duty. And I have USERA rights to return to my job up to 5 years cumulative time. And that is something that is a great benefit. After you use those 5 years, it's gone. However, you can use it again if you need to, if you get activated for a deployment. I have a lot of notes here, and I'm going to share this with you. One of the good things about being a civil servant is that there are different positions. In other words, depending on what your pay grade is, it could be a GS 5, 7, 9, 11, 12, 13, and 15 GS. There are workers and there are civilians, just like the Air Force. So it's the military side. It's just like that in the sense that you have leadership roles, you have more of a worker role. All of them are important. If you are working as a civil servant, you can apply for other jobs in other locations. You don't have to move. That's one of the things as a civilian is unless you want to. In other words, if I am at one base, I can be there for my entire career as a civilian, and that's a benefit if you like stability. But if you also want to move around, you can do that. I'll give you an example. I can move as with my civilian job to another base, preferably in Europe. I can do that, and I'll do that for 3 years or up to 5 years and get return rights to my position here at my home base. To me, that's a benefit. In 2010, when I was a civilian, I had an opportunity to go to Hungary for 7 weeks and do my exact same job at another base. And that was an incredible opportunity. On weekends, I would travel. I got per diem. I had a 2-bedroom apartment. I had a car, and it was growth. And at the same time, I got to serve other people in a different country. Other people being Air Force members, whatever services we had at that base, Papa Air Base. And I also assisted many civilians as well for Boeing or contractors, whoever was actually at that base. Another benefit is retirement. You do get a retirement that you pay into every single paycheck. I fall under FERS, F-E-R-S, and there's another one that was prior to my time, but I'm not very educated on that. So I put money into it, and the earliest I could retire is 57 years old for me. And that's something that I'll see what happens in the future is if I return to this civilian job or I finish off my active duty time. But that's one thing to look forward to is I will have, as of right now, I qualify for a civilian retirement down the road. You also get medical benefits as well that you have to pay. It's different from the service, from active duty, because active duty it's taken care of. As a civilian, there is a copay, and you pay every month as well. You have the option of Thrift Savings Plan as a civilian federal employee, and that's good. You get to pick the Roth or the traditional TSP. But as of right now, this information is current as of today. They will match up to 5% on the traditional TSP. So when I was a civilian contributing to the Thrift Savings Plan, what I was doing was I was paying off my house as much as possible, and I was doing a minimum of 5% so I can get that matching as well. And that's something that you qualify to get after 59 and a half years of age. Also, when I was a civilian, we were authorized to work out 3 times per week for up to 3 hours. So in other words, 1 hour per day. The rule was at my job, you go work out, and if it's at the end of the day, you come back to work so people can see your face and you pick up your civilian clothing and you go home. And the reason they did that was because some people would say, hey, I'm going to go work out, but they would leave and go home or go wherever, not to the gym. To me, that's important. Fitness, taking care of ourselves is very important. So that's one of the things that I was able to benefit from. Sometimes I didn't want to go to work out, but I asked myself the $1 million question, do I want to go work out or stay here one more hour? And the answer was I'd go work out. Camaraderie, I talked about briefly, it's just like the military. In my opinion, when you have military and you have civilian, there is interaction, but often, and more so than not, there is like an invisible line. So in other words, you're going to talk to the people, the military people, if you're a civilian, who you work with every day. But the other ones, it's kind of just a hi and bye, and it's the same the other ways around. When you're military, at least my experience is you'll talk to the civilians that you work with daily, but the other ones, it's kind of like hi, bye, or sometimes you don't get to know each other because somebody's going to transition out. Some of the negatives is with when the housing market crashed and the economy crashed, there was a furlough for 7 days before it was resolved, meaning for 7 Fridays, I was off. I had no choice, and I didn't get paid for that time. So sometimes that happens, and now you hear about continuing resolution, the CR, and that's a big headache as well because they have to approve the budget. Sometimes it's coming down to the last minute. In fact, that's often. A positive, though, is that you get holidays off. and those are the big holidays as well. And you build leave, whether it's annual leave, whether it's your sick leave as well. So you build that and that accumulates. You get some time off as well. It really is a good job. If you want to do professional military education as a civilian, you can. I have one friend who did the NCO Academy. She was the first civilian to do that at our base. I have another friend who, as a civilian, went and completed Squadron Officer School, Air Command Staff College, Air War College. Those are opportunities. You have to have the appropriate GS rank to apply. So for example, myself, I'm a GS 11, and my next professional military education is Air War College. I can't do that right now for two reasons. The first one is, on the military side, I'm a major. So you have to be a lieutenant colonel or lieutenant colonel select to apply for Air War College. As a civilian, you have to be a GS 12, and I'm a GS 11, so I don't qualify for that. But there are many opportunities. The last thing that I want to talk about is something called Palace Acquire. If you are a college student in your last year towards a 4-year degree, you can apply for something called Palace Acquire. And I'm going to put that link of information at the bottom of this video. I have two friends who've done this. They came in as a GS 5, 1 year later, GS 7, 1 year later, GS 9, 1 year later, GS 11. So now my friend Larry from Philly, if you watch some of my first videos, he was my camera guy, my friend who helped me out. And I have a few videos where he got to talk as well. Larry from Philly is now a GS 11. With that part or that option, you have to sign a mobility agreement, meaning if they can't find you a job at this location where you are, you're going to have to move wherever they find you a job. So that's how come Larry now is in Charleston, South Carolina. So that is general schedule, GS. It came right back to me. Remember I said I'm a GS 11. GS stands for general schedule. The best thing you can do is just Google out there and type in Department of the Air Force or whatever branch you want, civil service. It's a good option. I like it a lot. To me, I like the structure. It's just like the military. I'm away from that right now. And we will see what happens if I return or if I continue to finish my active duty time for the reserve. I hope this has been helpful. If you have questions, if you have comments, ask. If you're a military member right now and you've watched all of this video and say, well, this really doesn't apply to me, but I learned something, I'll say this. Hopefully you learned that as a veteran, you can go from being in uniform to a civilian and have a similar mission that you did when you were the military. The importance of civil servants are they're there for continuity. Also, when service members deploy, those civilians get to stay there. There are also opportunities for civilians to deploy here and there. Have a great day. Take care.